everyone, and welcome to the Screen Society podcast. I'm your host, Logan, and today we are diving into episodes for the very first time on this podcast, just our second episode. So if you didn't listen to our introduction podcast, it was about a 30-minute episode where we talked about some of the top 5 movies and TV shows that I've ever seen and just an introduction into what this podcast will be. And if you are joining us and this is your first episode, we are here to cover anything and everything TV and film. So I'm looking forward to joining you all in the conversation of all the top shows, some of the hidden gems, revisiting some old cult classics, and whatever else we can get into on this podcast. But again, today we are launching into our very first recap of a season and TV show, and that is going to be HBO Max's The Pitt, which is now streaming. And we can go see episode 1 of season 2, which debuted on January 8th, which was last Thursday. I've been sick over the last couple of days, so I've not been able to jump on. My voice I've been trying to save for different podcasts that I've been doing over the weekend, but we are finally here recording this today. I'm really excited to talk about this show because it is one that is very near and dear to my heart as I do work. I am not a practicing physician or a nurse or on the clinical side of a hospital, but I do work as a communication specialist at a hospital. And a lot of these stories and a lot of these day-to-day activities and different things that these cast members are going through and what the show is covering, it hits home with a lot of people that I talk to on a daily basis. And being in healthcare, I can tell you that there are some very real problems that this show tackles that I think are very interesting. The point of view that they take, the expertise that goes into writing this show, I think is spectacular. I think it does a nice job of really showcasing what happens inside of an ER or a hospital every single day. Obviously, there's going to be more dramatized things that happen on the TV show to keep that entertainment value. And, day to day in the ER isn't going to look exactly like this that we see on the TV show. But I think it's a good representation. I've talked to some people that have watched the show that also work in the ER and work in what they'll call the pit on the show, and they say that it's a pretty accurate representation of just some of the things that they have to deal with. And a lot of times what the pit does, I think, so well is it characterizes different people in the healthcare system, where it gives us a very personal story. It gives us some of the struggles, some of the challenges that some of these folks have to go through ever since COVID, and even beginning a time with healthcare, I think. And as time has gone on, there's a lot of good social commentary around what's happening in the landscape of healthcare. So we're going to tackle all sorts of different things. We're going to have a lot of great discussions, I think, on this show, just because it provides so many great opportunities and entry level for people that want to get into talking about some of the challenges and things that are faced. But it's a really good show. I really enjoyed season 1, and we're going to kind of talk about why season 1 was such a hit. If you're not watching the show yet, I definitely recommend going back and watching season 1 before you start these recaps for season 2. And there's some spoilers ahead. But season 1, what made it so great, I think, was the fact that the writing was very true to what people experience every day in the healthcare system. And I think people on the patient side of things, on the doctor side of things, nursing, even the staff that is kind of the underbelly of what a hospital is that keeps the hospital running. We had so many great storylines. We had so many great patients and characters. It also talks about, social injustice. It talks a lot about COVID and the trauma that was experienced by healthcare professionals during the time of COVID and how they're trying to cope with that as they move forward. We're now 5, almost 6 years removed from when COVID started. It's currently January of 2026, and 6 years have passed, but this trauma has become scars, and you pile on new traumas on top of that trauma. And I think that's where you're starting to see season 2 head, especially after what happens in season 1, and especially the ending of season 1 that we got. So many good things happen to so many of these characters, but so many bad things also happen to some of these characters. So we're going to talk about all those things, kind of wrap up season 1, what I thought of season 1 before we jump into the recaps of season 2. But some behind the scenes creator and showrunner, Scott Gemmell, who is a fantastic writer and showrunner. I think does a really nice job of really telling a story that John Wells and Noah Wiley, Mel Herbert, all of them wanted to tell. I think that there are so many things that they do with each of these characters that really resonate with people that had seen ER. A lot of these guys had and girls have worked on ER. Producers of The West Wing and John Wells, who is the director on this show, who worked with Noah Wiley, and all these people have had history in working on ER, which was such a legendary TV show back in the day, and have continued that magic. And I think you had one shift, which is how this show is broken up. It's each episode is broken up into a shift. So, for instance, today we're going to be talking about season 2, episode 1. It starts. The title of the episode is actually 7 a.m., and then you get 8 a.m., 9 a.m., and so on and so forth. There's 15 episodes. It's a 15-hour shift at Pittsburgh Trauma Medical Center, ER. They call it the Pitt, which we'll talk a lot about in season 2 because it's come up as something that needs to be discussed, and I think will later be discussed as we get further and further into season 2 of what it means. The title itself is very symbolic, and again, it's a very intense, very gory, very gruesome type of show. So if you're launching into this, you're listening to this podcast, and you're catching up, I will say if you're a little squeamish around blood and guts, this is definitely going to be a tougher watch, just because everything that they've done, especially from season 1 to season 2, it covers. I mean, it shows pretty much real life procedures going on, and there's not many ways around that. So once they start to cut into people, you're going to see blood, guts, whatever you might imagine you'd see in an ER. But I think it makes it that more realistic. I think it makes it resonate more, just because of, I mean, this is an everyday lifestyle for so many people that work in healthcare, especially surgeons and people in the ER. You're seeing a lot of these horrific things that um, not many people, I think, walk away from and feel nothing. I mean, I feel that, yes, as a healthcare professional, you would get used to some of the things that you see in an ER or in a surgery, but there are still things that are thrown at you every single day that are just a little bit different. There's more blood, there's more guts, there's more instances of things happening that you've never quite seen before. So I can't imagine having to try to balance what you're seeing, and trying to cope with what you're seeing, and try to move on through just a normal daily life after you step outside of the ER or outside of work, and you try to go home and you, you make a meal. And it's fascinating to me. I always say that whenever I'm talking to people that work at the hospital I work at, where I can't imagine having to do all these things that they do throughout their 8-hour, 10-hour shift, and then go home and act like everything is semi normal, or stepping away from this and not having the horror stories that so many of people in healthcare have. So, and again, I think they do such a wonderful job. The creators of the show, Scott Gemmell, I think Noah Wiley, John Wells, they do such a nice job of capturing what a shift looks like for a medical professional. So, jumping into the characters that we love, Dr. Robby Rabinovich, who is played by Noah Wiley. His first name is Michael. He is the emotional center of this series, a senior attending a physician carrying the weight of trauma, responsibility, and leadership and chaos of the ER. Dr. Frank Langdon, who is a very complex character, returns to season 2 after suspicion of related to addiction, bringing with him unresolved personnel and professional challenges. You've got Dr. Samira Moyan, who is a rising talent in the ER, whose compassion and intensity bring out the best and sometimes worst decisions in herself and those around her. Dana Evans, a senior staff member, charge nurse, who's the senior charge nurse, who is going to be the one that you'll see quite a bit in season 1. But in season 2, she's got a really good part to start season 2. So I think that we're going to get a lot of Dana Evans, which there were a lot of rumors online that maybe she was kind of taking a step back in her role, but it appears that she is going to be front and center once again in season two. Dr. Mel Hall, who's played by Taylor Dearden, Trinity Santos, who's played by Issa Briones. You've got Cassie McKay, who is played by Fiona Dourif. Dennis Whitaker, who's played by Sharon Howell. And then you've got Victoria Javadi, who's played by Shabana Aziz. A really great cast. And obviously, there's more characters and more cast that we'll talk about as we get into these episodes because there are so many different characters that we haven't discussed. But those are the center and the core characters that are going to be the heart of this show. Season one, again, you had so many things happen. The one thing I do want to mention is as Robby is trying to deal with the trauma that he faced with the passing of his mentor, the passing of different people that he was close to, and all these patients that he was close to during COVID, during the pandemic. Season one centers around the fallout from the pandemic and how healthcare professionals were just expected to kind of go and on about their life and try to cope with what they had experienced over that year and a half, 2 year period where death was always around them and they were losing people to this horrible disease. And I think that it does such a spectacular job with that. And as he starts to really try to figure out how he's going to cope with that PTSD, then happens a shooting where he's got a close relative. I think it's a son, stepson. I can't remember exactly what the relation is, but it's definitely a kid that I think it's his son. But he loses a girlfriend in that shooting, and he's got to deal with all these casualties, and it's a mass casualty event. And Robby's having to deal with it, but everybody else around the main cast is also trying to deal with different things that they experience in season one, which we'll try to tie in with season two because it's hard to go back and explain everybody's story from season one and how it will connect. But we'll get there because season two really looks to be just building on to what we already know based on season one. So we'll talk about more of season one as we get further and further in. But that's where we leave off, is them trying to deal with the aftermath of this shooting of Pitt Fest, which is a music festival, very real situation to what we face here in the United States every single day, is the threat or the imminent danger surrounding guns and the mass casualty events that we often have here in the U.S. And it's become pretty frequent. So then you take a step back, you're thinking about all the things that these people have gone through with COVID, and now you're getting a real life look into another horrific event, something that is very relevant in society today. And they do a nice job of commenting on, what healthcare professionals have to deal with when they're dealing with these mass casualty events. So that's really well done. That ends the season, and then it moves on into the second season. And we got word pretty quick that it was going to be centered around July 4th weekend. And sure enough, season two premieres on January 8th. And it is July 4th. We get that pretty quick as the episode starts off with a nice shot of downtown Pittsburgh. It shows the Allegheny River. It shows PNC Park where the Pirates play. It shows the medical center. And Robby is on the bridge. It is that iconic yellow bridge in Pittsburgh that you oftentimes see. And he is riding a motorcycle in behind an ambulance, passes it on its left into the other lane. He goes into the other lane to pass, and he waves and nods at the ambulance driver. And the thing that you notice right away is that he is not wearing a helmet. And as he pulls into the parking lot, he gets off his bike. He walks into the hospital, and right as he's walking in the hospital, you see a shot of his back and his backpack. And sure enough, he's got a helmet attached to the backpack. So right away, you're going, wow, that's interesting, because he's kind of making that move. He signals. He's not doing anything crazy to pass the ambulance, but he passes the ambulance, kind of acknowledging the fact that, like, hey, I know the ambulance drivers. I'll see you guys at the pit in the hospital, and we're going to start our day here. And it is an episode called 7 a.m. So we're right at the beginning of the shift, and it is 10 months after the end of season one. Takes place over the July 4th weekend. Dr. Robby is contemplating a sabbatical as he walks into the hospital. He is greeted by Dr. Shen, who is talking to him about the different things that are happening, because Dr. Shen is the attending on the night shift. So he's doing the pass off where he's trying to tell Robby and update Robby on what's going on in the pit so that they can make that transition, filling in Robby on all the patients that he's going to be seeing. Dr. Shen's walking with him. But you get these really nice moments with Dr. Robby, and he's interacting with Perla. He's interacting with the different staff members. He has a interaction with Donald, the nurse, where he's talking about the fact that he's going on a sabbatical. He's stopping before we get to when he's talking to Donald and stuff. When he goes through the waiting room, he notices that it's busy just like every other ER, but it's not as hectic as I think we saw in last season. From what I remember, it's kind of a calm before the storm kind of feeling to it, because there's an illusion that Dr. Shen makes later on as Robby makes it back behind the doors into the pit. You get an allusion to maybe something that's coming. But Dr. Robby's walking in to what seems to be a relatively calm waiting room, even though it's crowded. There's not really much happening inside of the waiting room at the moment, so that's a pretty good sign. But as Robby's walking in, he stops by the plaque where he sees his old mentor that had died during COVID on the wall, and it's the plaque that he stops and looks at for season one. He stops and actually looks at the plaque. Let me look up the mentor's name. I think it's Dr. Sam Adamson, I believe. Sorry. Yes. Dr. Montgomery Adamson was the main figure in Robby's life when it comes to healthcare. And so there's a really nice shot. The first episode of the first season, he's looking at Dr. Adamson's plaque on the wall that commemorates him, because he passed away during COVID. Robby actually watches him die in season one. Spoiler alert. But in the start of season two, episode one, he's now got his back facing the plaques that he was looking at in season one, but he's looking at the new plaque that's been put up for the Pitt Fest shooting that ended season one, where they had the mass casualty event and lost a bunch of lives due to gun violence. So he's now looking at new trauma that he now faces, and he has that moment of collection and trying to gather his thoughts, and then he moves on, and that's when he interacts with Dr. Shen. He also talks to Donald. He passes Donald while going towards Dr. Shen, I believe it is. And Donald is one of the nurses on staff, and he's talking about this sabbatical that he's going on. It's going to be 3 months. Donald's like, "I'm going to miss you," and Dr. Robby's like, "You won't miss me. By the time I'm back, your kid," who Donald had talked about not getting much sleep at all because he just had a kid. He's like, "By the time I get back, your kid will be sleeping through the night. It's going to go by real quick, real fast." So already we're setting up this sabbatical where Dr. Robby's going to be going on this trip. And we start to get more and more clues as the episode goes on as to why maybe he's taking this trip, why we are having some of these characters interact the way they're interacting. But right away, we are on the last shift that Dr. Robby will work before this sabbatical, which is wild to me. And it's funny because I was listening to some other podcasts, and they're like, why did he choose July 4th as the last day that he would work? Like, why not just do June and let like the new attending deal with July 4th, which, I guess a team player kind of thing, right? This is the last big holiday of the ER where you're dealing with a lot of different traumatic events because of July 4th and the fireworks and explosives and all sorts of other things, which is perfectly set up. I think this will be great. I'd almost guess, I don't know if it's going to happen, but like, it almost feels like the next episode would maybe be around like Halloween or flu and cold. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm trying to think of, because these are only one day. This only takes place during a day, kind of like what 24 did. You have a 15-hour shift is one season. So it's all in the same day. All of these things are happening. I'm just trying to think of different, like they're going to have to be holidays, or they're going to be at the center around days where things get crazy. But I guess not. I guess you could do it anytime and have different traumatic events happen. But I think it's perfect that they've chosen July 4th, which is very busy in the ER because of all the things happening and gatherings. So that's where we're starting here in season two. And right away you get those quick wit kind of things where they're talking to Robbie about that, about leaving on his sabbatical, and then he goes into a room, and there's a lady that is very distraught, I think kind of out of her mind a little bit, where she's talking and doesn't quite know what she's talking about. I don't know if it's because of drugs or because of trauma or whatever's happening, but basically she's she's telling all of them like, hey, I gotta pray and stuff like that. Like, hopefully I'll get better. Hopefully I'll get better. And they end up just giving her an extra dose of whatever it might be that she's needing. And they walk out of the room, and Dr. Shen's talking to Robbie like, whoa, that was crazy. All that needed to happen was this lady to get an extra dose of whatever the medication she needed to calm down. And Robbie says a little along the lines of like, yeah, that is what is needed, but also you got to think about the fact that like she's kind of lost her mind because she's in this uniform from this diner that hasn't existed for like 3 or 4 years. So this lady's just wearing some random uniform that she's had for 3 years since her diner closed. So she's clearly not in the right state of mind. And Robbie's kind of joking, like, yeah, I wouldn't be as concerned if it wasn't for the fact that she's also now wearing an outfit or uniform that hasn't existed for years. So yeah, maybe we should identify her as having some kind of issue. But just kind of going along the lines of, there's all sorts of crazy things that these medical professionals have to step into, where they don't know what the day to day is going to look like. They step into these wild situations and moments. They go into these patients' rooms that are having some challenges, maybe mentally or physically, and they're not quite sure what's going on or how to make that connection. And I mean, really, there's not really many jobs like that, where you're stepping into situations where the people that you're dealing with are being challenged by health things or mental things, where you just don't know where they are. Like, you're having to go into these rooms and engage so many different things as a medical professional, and try to stay professional, and try to stay calm and prepare for the worst and prepare for the best. Like, it's got to be so challenging, and something that I don't personally know what that's like, is stepping into a situation and then reacting to what you see. And sometimes it goes from 0 to 100 and you're not quite expecting it. I think that's what is set up so perfectly in this episode. And I think that that's something that these writers have done so well. And Joe Sachs, who also, I think that's good to mention here, Joe Sachs is a writer producer. Dr. Joe Sachs is a writer producer on this show as well, and he also worked on ER. He's worked on a lot of medical shows and dramas, and he is the medical expert resident, I guess you would call him, where he is helping simultaneously develop these characters, develop these feelings. And there's a really great interview with him that he did with the HBO Max people who are doing the simultaneous broadcast of a podcast. It's like the companion podcast that HBO does. So if you haven't checked it out, go check out Joe Sachs's interview with the HBO Max crew that did the Pitt season 2 episode 1. And there's a great 10-minute segment where they're talking to Joe Sachs, and he's talking about how much research has to go into these kind of shows, because Noah said that, and Noah has I think his mother was a nurse at some point, or throughout his life, she was a nurse. And she is a big influence in his life, and he's trying to do right by all medical professionals. And he was getting emails during COVID of like, we need shows back that really talk about and get into the trauma and the stories behind what was happening in COVID. And that's where Noah Wiley's like, you know what? He approached John Wells, I think it was, and he and John were talking about the fact that they would create a show that was centered around this. And now here we are, 2 seasons in already, and you can just tell it oozes with medical expertise. You have a lot of practicing doctors who watch this show, who say it is very medically accurate. Obviously, there's some things that are different, or a little bit dramatized, but that's because of the show. And Joe Sachs talks about the fact that he made it an intentional thing to, one, make it as medically accurate as possible, and two, he really wanted to focus on the psyche of what these characters would be going through, what these people would be going through in their day-to-day lives. So it's not just about them and how they're dealing with what they're doing at work and what they're doing at work and explaining what they're doing as procedures and as doctors, but also there's that emotional toll that so much of this takes on different people in the medical profession, and from the doctors down to the nurses down to the lab techs down to the custodial down to whoever you might talk to. um, that is what Joe Sachs wanted to do. He wanted to make it as real as possible and these people as real as possible, because these people are not just doctors who are robotic, they are people as well, and they're having to deal with their own emotions outside of the ER, outside of the pit, but also, operating within their professional setting as well. Key moments of episode one. Just, we're not going to go necessarily scene by scene, but we'll talk about the big key moments that I feel like were very instrumental in getting this show back and really doing well in this first season to launch into season two. Robby struggles. So in the first hour, we're not quite sure what space Robby is really in. He's Noah Wiley does a great job with Robby in the fact that, like, you do get a lot of emotional connection with him in season one, but there's still this feeling as a somebody watching this show that Dr. Robby is still at arm's length, where you can't quite, like, even though we've broken him down in different ways, there's still a lot of different things that he's dealing with that we're not quite sure of how he's really approaching that, or if he's approaching that, right? So this is 10 months removed from the big shooting, where he almost lost a family member. Well, I guess he did lose a family member because his family member lost his loved one, his partner. But I still feel like we're just at the very surface of Robby tapping into the actual pain that he felt losing his mentor, pain he felt losing all the people that he did during COVID, and then also the shooting and having to deal with that, but also having to deal with the people around him deal with that, because while they also were involved in different things when COVID was going on, they don't maybe have as much trauma, or they have as little. You're not trying to trauma compare with one another, but Robby felt like, as a leader, as he was their leader, he should be the one that steps in to try to make sure that they also get through their trauma as well. So, and you see that a lot of times where the leader of a group, the leader of a family, the leader of a profession, whenever they go through trauma together, that the leader will often take it upon themselves to make sure everybody else is okay when they need to check in on themselves as well. And this is a great, launch into mental health and how we deal with trauma and how we deal with the loss of someone or grieving, to not just look at how you get others around you through things that are difficult, but also talking to yourself and making sure that you are also taken care of, that you are also going through the different steps that you need in order to grieve and to move on or to accept what has happened, and then go from there. So that's big and that's weighing heavy, and you can tell right away that Robby is dealing with something. We go back to the very opening scene of this episode, and it's there's talk about Robby on his bike, and it was interesting that they opened with this particular visual. And Noah Wiley talked about this in that podcast I was talking about. That's the companion podcast. They interview him for about 10 minutes, and he said that he made it a point where he went to John Wells the night before filming the first scene of this new season, where he said that, riding the bike in was great, passing the ambulance, kind of living a little bit on the edge. A motorcycle is always going to give that impression that someone is living on the edge, because it is a very dangerous thing to do. But he said that, why not remove the helmet, but also have the helmet visible to where we, as the people watching it, know he's not wearing his helmet, but the people around him that aren't seeing him ride his bike, they just assume he's wearing his helmet because he's a doctor. He's a smart individual. Why would you risk any kind of head injury just by one split second by not wearing a helmet? It gives you that extra safety net that you would have riding a bike, and he's not doing that. So that just adds right away. It just adds this, like, oh, he's still not right. Like, there's still something going on with Dr. Robby. Like, we're going to get into even more of his psyche, and I think it's very symbolic and allegoric of like I think it shows that he is somebody that knows better. He is somebody that knows what can happen and in an instant, but he's also uh not quite right in the fact that like he's not dealt with the trauma, he's not dealt with it. And to be honest with you, he's kind of pushing the limits to see how far he can get away with different things because he's not yet faced the trauma that he's needed to face. He's running from his problems. He's got no time to deal with his problems. He doesn't really have the ability to look at what's in front of him and what could go wrong because he's too far gone. He's trying to get away from whatever it is that is chasing him, his demons, his nightmares. He's trying to remove that. And he's trying to do things that make him feel alive, that make him feel just feel right. You always hear that thing called I just want to feel something, and that kind of has what that that feeling is when you go right into this episode and that first visual that you get of him riding his bike in. So one thing I did want to mention, another thing I want to mention, sorry, is that in his backpack that the helmet is hanging on, and this was something that was very interesting to me. He had the props department back in season one put a book in his backpack called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And he said to the props department to have that book dog eared to page 17 last season, because in season two, it is now that he has that book in his backpack, it is now completed. He has read the book, and this bike that he's riding in on is something that he has built, that he has maintained, that he has now brought back to life, that he is in that zen and that the art of rebuilding that bike, that he's now going to go on a 3 month sabbatical to a UNESCO heritage site where he's going to be dealing with different things, kind of a volunteer type of thing. There was actually like a badge on his backpack that kind of looked like the Doctors Without Border motif. So people online were running with that as well. But basically, the 3 month sabbatical is him going to help others where they might need help as a volunteer, and as with his medical expertise. But this feels more of like a 3 month journey of him going on to try to find out who he is, because he says that the book in the interview, he says that the book, if you've ever read the Zen and the Art of the Motorcycle Maintenance, the book focuses on issues of things chasing you, the demons of your past chasing you or haunting you, and you are going on this journey to try to figure out how you're going to face those things. So that's what I think the 3 month sabbatical is going to be. Obviously, I think we've all kind of put those context clues together, is that this 3 month sabbatical is not just something that he's doing. He'll come back and he'll be ready and refreshed and ready to go, as a sabbatical usually is. This is more about a self discovery. This is more about, is he going to come back? I think that's going to be a big question as time goes on. And I'll get to where the end of each episode, I'll kind of speculate as to what I think is happening in these episodes leading into the next. So leading into episode 2 and beyond, I'll give you some predictions as to what I think is going on. But that should help you allude to what I'm talking about, is the fact that he just doesn't seem at ease. There's something going on mentally, and I'm not sure that he's quite ready or ever will be ready to kind of um, identify what those problems are and face them head on. He then interacts with Dana. He interacts with the nursing station. He talks about his sabbatical. Or sorry, there are moments throughout each of these interactions that comes up that there is a new attending that has come in. She's brought in bagels, bagel spread on her first day, that his replacement is here, and he makes the joke of like, she's not my replacement, she's just doing this while I'm gone for 3 months, and then I'll come back and assume this role. The nurses kind of roll their eyes. Dana gives him a hard time. Perla gives him a hard time. It's a really, really nice setup into a new character that we're getting in in the Pitt season 2, episode 1. So it's a great start. I mean, it really shows you that this new character that they're bringing in is not meant to replace Robby, but she is coming in to fill in for the things that they'll be missing while he is gone. So that's where we get into our new character. and that is going to be Dr. Al Hashimi. And Dr. Though they called her Dr. Al, he calls her Dr. Al right away, I think. Um, and Baran Al Hashimi is very tech forward. She is very methodical in her approach. She is uh, a contrast to the way that Robbie operates, and you get that sense right away because the first interaction that you have with her, she's running this. It's a drill where she's having the residents and some of the new medical students in on a CPR practice where they're practicing a procedure, something goes wrong, they're having to do CPR. She's trying to coach them on what she would do, how she would do different things. The methods are very black and white, very textbook, very data driven, research driven. Like you can tell everything going on in her mind is very calculated and very, very different from what we get with Dr. Robbie, who interacts with care or patients and his coworkers, colleagues more on instinct and what he's used to. And there's this moment where Dr. Robbie walks in on this drill. You find out it is a drill because at first it looks like they're actually going through a real procedure and they're having complications, but then it zooms out and it shows that they're just doing it to a dummy. And she's standing there having them practice. And he's like, why are they practicing? You know, you get real practice from doing things in real time and experience. And it's hard to kind of simulate those situations because those aren't always the most effective or authentic. And she says, yes, but based on everything that I've ever done. And he goes, I'm sorry, but have you ever really worked in a trauma center? And she goes, no, not really. So right away we have some tension and it's building a little bit because she's very motivated by data, very motivated by the black and white, the bottom line kind of thing. And she actually, throughout the episode, there's mention of her using AI and how to interact with patients in a very scripted way. I think she actually gives out, they're called patient passports. And basically, what those are just basically the journey that you take from door to being discharged from the emergency room or the hospital. And it's basically like, here's all the things that you can expect to experience. Here's all the things, the wait times and all this kind of stuff, which is crazy because having worked in a hospital, obviously, or working in a hospital, that is actually a real thing that a lot of hospitals will do. They'll give you this basically from wherever you're stepping in, wherever you become the patient, whether it's through the ER, outpatient, inpatient, whatever it might be. And here's what you can expect during your time with us. Here's anything that's on a pamphlet or it's on like a QR code. You can scan it to read more information about your procedure coming up or whatever it might be. Here's what you need to do to be discharged. Like it's a patient satisfaction thing. It's a patient experience thing where the hospital is trying to cover all the ground of like, here's what you can expect. So they aren't really surprised because it can be very scary stepping into a hospital as a patient because you don't know what's going on. There's a lot of jargon that you just don't know what they're saying or why they're saying it or how they're, interacting with you. Obviously, there's healthcare professionals that are very great at what they do, but sometimes there is a lack of caring or talking about the patients as if they're humans. So there's that aspect of it. So hospitals try to cut out that middleman and have created different plans for different people. Here's what you can expect. Here's what you should know. If you have any questions, let us know, kind of thing. And that's what she wants to do. She wants to bring more transparency to patients, but using AI models, using AI to actually enhance and inform her team and her staff, which Dr. Robbie's, you can tell, is kind of against that. And I think that's going to become a big thing because AI is such a huge thing right now, a huge talking point, topic of discussion. And I think that we're going to get into why Dr. Robby and Dr. Al Hashimi's styles clash. I will say this show is very good at this. And some shows are just not very good at this. I think they present this idea that Dr. Baran Al Hashimi is good at what she does. She is very well respected. She has the confidence that she needs to be successful. I think she knows what she's doing. She just does it differently than Robby. And it doesn't, as a writer, you don't want people in most cases, you don't want people to come in and immediately hate somebody. Like you want to try to gain, even with villains, you try to start them with some kind of resemblance of like humanity, or them actually being somebody that you can kind of see why they've become the villain, or see why they are the antagonist. And she's going to present herself, I think, as an antagonist. But the writers of the Pit, they don't want you to come in. And they've said this. They don't want you to come in hating Al Hashimi, because she does have a lot of good, valuable things to offer to the Pit and the team at the hospital. And I think it's interesting because you get this transition period where Robbie's going to be absent for 3 months, and then Al Hashimi's day one trying to already change things, which, as most professionals will say, it is very difficult to adapt to change. It's really, really hard to accept change when it comes from somebody from the outside who's coming in to try to change things, because they have to try to earn your trust. I think that's why they allude to the fact that she brought bagels the first day. It's like this real nice bagel spread that Donald, the nurse, had said to Robbie right as he walks into the ER in the morning. She's trying to gain this trust of the whole entire group. And to do that, she's trying to buy her way through with bagels and being nice. And she's very kind, and they're respecting her. They're doing what she's asking. They're attempting to do things her way. And I think there will be a divide of like, some people like the way that she does it. Some people like the way that Robbie does things. I think there are different types of people that work in different ways. There's the type A, there's the type B, and I think that they're very different. And I think that's the way they're presenting Al Hashimi. And I think Dr. Al is going to be a really great character. I think somebody that will cause some challenges for the first half of this season with Dr. Robbie. But I think as time goes on, that this is something that will um, blossom into a friendship, a mutual respect. And there were some rumors, because Dr. Robbie's past relationship, who he had with a doctor from season one who's no longer on the show, and that's Heather Collins, who's no longer going to be on the show, and he had a relationship with, and she lost a baby. That she Dr. Al Hashimi might step into. There's rumors that she might step into more of a romantic role with Robbie. I'll be interested to see if that's right. Seems kind of odd, but then again, some of that kind of lines up, because if she is just coming in for an interim stint for 3 months, then maybe I could see where like the idea is that she's just going to leave after that, and maybe they by the end of this episode have some sort of mutual respect for one another that kind of alludes to a fact that maybe things could eventually get romantic. It's a 15-hour shift, so that's where I find it hard for this show to really establish romantic feelings towards somebody, because we just don't get outside of one day. But maybe, I don't know. Like there were a lot of discussions online before the season started that he would be, this new Al Hashimi would be his his new love interest. But I think it's going to be very hard for a show to establish that in 15 hours when he's just met her. But we'll, you never know. You never know. So we'll see. But I'm interested to see what that relationship will be. But Dr. Al Hashimi, I think, is going to be a spectacular character in this show, full of characters that we already love. And Sepeda Moafi, I think is how you say the actress's name. She is already knocking it out of the park. So I'm really excited just to see how that grows. But yeah, that's how it starts. Scene one, Al Hashimi, you get a lot of that after you get that intro. Robbie's talked about his sabbatical and why that all matters. But then you start to get updates on different people. So Dr. Dana, or sorry, not doctor, Nurse Dana Evans, who's the charge nurse, is back. If you remember, she got abused, physically assaulted in the last part of her season one. She gets punched out by a patient when she goes out for a smoke break. And there were a lot of discussions whether she'd be back for season two. But she is back and she's ready to go. She talks about the fact that she is ready to move on, but she's taken a more reduced role at the hospital. She seems to be working more part-time or as needed, rather than being there all the time, because she's a conversation. I think it was with Princess, the nurse, where she's talking about the fact that she is taking some time off to just enjoy life, because she's getting older, and she talks about how she's gotten older. She's been around for a long time, and she doesn't need to really be there every day. You have Dr. Mel King, who is now dealing with the consequences of a malpractice lawsuit, and I laugh every time I think about Mel, just because Taylor Dearden is by far, in a way, my favorite character actress on this show. In Mel King, she's just so good. She presents that idea of, I think, obviously she's on the spectrum, um, but she does it in such a great way. Of like, she's clearly got her challenges, but she is so very intellectually gifted that it's hard to kind of separate where she's being funny and serious and joking, and she's kind of go with the flow, but also very anxious about everything. She's pretty much anxiety, the epitome of anxiety, and this just builds into that character. So obviously, if you've been around healthcare or know anything that deals with healthcare, everybody in healthcare gets sued at some point or threatened to get sued. Like, people will just yell it in healthcare. Like, they'll be in the ER and just like, I'm suing all of you, and nothing ever comes of it. Or if it does, there's settlements or whatever. So there's always threats of being sued. And she's talking to Santos. She's sitting at the computer because they're both doing their notes. And Santos is sitting there and going, "What's going on with you, Mel? Like, you're being weird, weirder than normal." Because she is very quirky, which I love. Santos is so good at being kind of a rough, like, tough love kind of person, and Mel is just so, like, happy and in the clouds and, like, very kind, very sweet, but very anxious and doesn't really know social cues very well. So Santos bothering her, and she goes, "I don't know, Mel, what's going on?" This is my favorite quote of the whole episode. She goes, "There's a lot going on with you today. You're acting like somebody gunned down your favorite K-pop band." And she goes, "Well, I don't really have a favorite K-pop band," because she didn't pick up on the fact that she was being sarcastic, Santos. But Mel's just rolling with it. Mel was having a good time with it. But she's talking about this lawsuit and how it's really impacting her, and all these things are horrible, and she's scared, and and Santos is like, everybody gets sued, and like, as an attending, you are covered by the hospital. Like, the hospital will cover any lawsuit that you'll get a lawyer, and it pretty much will go away in settlement. So that's what she's talking about. Mel catching up with her. Her boy is back, right? And this is something that I think all of us knew was going to happen, but Dr. Langdon is back, and one of the best actors, I think, on this show, because Dr. Langdon is a hard character to play, and I think Patrick Ball plays a spectacular role with this character. And so basically, he had, if you're not caught up on season one, or if you're just catching up, or you want to recap, like, whatever happened to Langdon, I'm confused. He's the one that gets addicted to benzos. He starts to take drugs from patients. He goes into, I think it's like the medical locker, where the pharmaceutical lockers, where you can go in and type in different numbers to unlock certain narcotics, certain drugs that you can't have just hanging out on the floor. But he's going in and he's taking from patients that he's giving these drugs to, which is really a nice setup to what we get later on in this episode. But Dr. Langdon is returning after a 10-month rehab stint where he's dealt with his drug addiction, and he is back in the hospital. He betrayed a lot of people in this hospital before. But if you flash back, he was there to help out during the trauma of the shooting. He actually was in the hospital, so he just steps in to help out, even though he's not technically practicing or supposed to be practicing, because they were going to put him on suspension. And so he's back from a 10-month rehab stint. And when he first walks in, he goes and the attendings are kind of doing their rounds, and he runs into Mel. And then when they're doing their rounds, I think it's McKay, Mel, and Santos. And and Langdon says, "Hey, what's going on?" And Mel, out of her awkwardness, goes, "Oh my gosh, Dr. Langdon, you're back." And she goes over to like try to start to hug him, but realizes, "Oh, I don't hug." So she just kind of like stops, hands right before his arm, and she kind of just goes, and squeezes his bicep like, "Hey, how you doing?" And then kind of awkwardly like backs up off of him, and he kind of looks at her like, "Hey, Mel, how's it going?" It is great because, and I forgot about how great their relationship was, so I went back and started to watch like Mel and Langdon moments, and he's the one that deals with her and her. It's very OCD, very anxiety driven. She starts to have a mental breakdown and a panic attack, and Langdon's there to give her advice. Langdon is always there. A lot of people want to ship Mel and Langdon, like for them to become a couple, but it's ultimately just, it feels very big brother little sister, where he's looking to protect her from things that could go wrong. And throughout the first season, he's there every time that she's having issues to try to work through things. And then when he's gone, she starts to have that breakdown of like, you know, he's not as pure. She's struggling with this, with him being absent. She really misses her best friend, is essentially what this is. And she is so excited when he comes back. And it's one of my favorite scenes of season two, episode one, because she does freak out quite a bit whenever he does return, which is which was just great. It was just great. A nod to what was happening last season. Dr. Moan is juggling work and stress. So obviously her mother is still very overbearing, and Dr. Moan is getting text messages during different procedures that they're doing, and the phone's going off. And she's like, "I'm so sorry. I'm trying to deal with my mother's moving me out of the childhood home that we lived in." And like, she's trying to move all my stuff. So you can still tell there's this real difficulty for Dr. Moan, whose mother works at that hospital, who is seen as a legend in the medical field, trying to live in her shadows, and she's continuing to be overbearing. And Dr. Moen has had some breakthrough with her last season, but she really just continues to live in like this really tough spot with her mother. And because she's so talented in what she does, she's very young. She's basically a prodigy, and she's having to live in her mother's shadow, who has always been and always will be one of the best medical professionals. So she's trying to deal with that, and she's very overbearing, and it's very condescending, the conversations that her mother has with her. And so if you're looking back to last season, that's where that's kind of gone awry. But that's really Dr. Moen. I mean, she doesn't really get a whole lot of run here in episode one of season two. There were a couple that I feel like, or sorry, no, yeah, there was a couple that like Savati, or sorry, not Savati. Javati was the one whose mother, I believe. Dr. Moen is still dealing with that, the text messages and stuff though. But Dr. Moen doesn't really get a lot of run. Javati does, but not like the overbearing kind of stuff that I was talking about, alluding to. Dr. Abbott is not seen yet because he is the night shift attending. So we are not sure quite where he is yet on this season, but I'm sure we're going to see him at some point. Sorry, I'm back into the trying to get back into the swing of things. Moan is the doctor that they called slow, because she works so slowly. She's very methodical. Dr. Javati was the one who has the mother that's overbearing. So, and again, I think that they do such a great job with that. I can't wait to see Dr. Javati's mom again, because I think it adds an extra element of challenges, issues, kind of an antagonist in a way. But she really is somebody that I feel we get more of this season. Dr. Moan, not really much in this episode, some, but not to the point where we're getting much of her development yet. Yolanda Garcia, we do get a nod to that one. And I believe at the beginning of the episode, Whitaker's talking about, because Whitaker's rooming with Santos. And Santos alludes to the fact that Garcia had left a toothbrush or something, and they had the toothbrush mix up or something. So I think it's assumed that Santos and Garcia are a thing. But I'm sure we're going to get more clarification on that relationship as time goes on and progresses as well. But speaking of Dr. Whitaker, one of our fan favorites, who is still trying to find his footing, is now a first-year resident and is mentoring two medical students. And he he is doing such a great job. He's channeling all of Robby's instincts, especially after calling a moment of silence for a patient's death not realizing that Robby is right behind him, and Robby comes up. It's a real nice moment early on in the episode where the two medical students are sitting in there with the patient that has deceased, and Whitaker says, "Let's take a moment of silence to reflect and remember this patient because somebody, we should all give the respect to this patient because sometimes they don't have family, sometimes they don't have that person doing the same thing for them." So Robby always wanted to make sure that we all take the time to kind of reflect on what has happened here. That this was a person; they're not just numbers. That this person lying in that bed was somebody's family member, friend, whatever it might be. So Whitaker does the same exact thing with his two medical students. Doesn't know that Robby's in behind him because if you remember Whitaker's first day with Robby, a song starts playing and it's inappropriate, and the medical silent or the medical the moment of silence when they're dealing with that in the first season. Fast forward to season 2, and now Whitaker's putting that on to the medical students as that's something that we do here. And Robby's loving it. Robby's like, this kid, man, he's just a sponge. He absorbs so much. He's a great doctor. He's a great friend. And I really enjoy this kid that has come such a long way because of Robby's teaching. And now Whitaker is teaching the medical students what he has learned from Robby. It's kind of that real cool moment. And then you just see Robby close the door quietly so that they can all have their moment of silence inside of that room. And Robby is very happy with what Whitaker has done. Speaking of some patients, it was told in interviews leading up to the season that there will be 21 patients focused on, said Dr. Joe Sachs, who is the producer, medical writer on the show. Right away, we get a young girl named Kylie Connors, a young girl with a chin laceration who may be an abuse victim, blood in the urine, bruises all over. Her dad's girlfriend brings her in. So it's kind of this assumption that maybe the father's hiding from something. And Santos, who dealt with a very similar situation last year where and we now know that Santos has dealt with some type of abuse as a young kid, and now she's dealing with another young child that she now fears because of season 1. She had a child where or she had somebody in the ER where she found out that the dad was abusing the girl, and now flash forward to season 2 might be the same kind of thing. Santos thinks she's dealing with a child that's been abused by her father, so she's having to ask all these questions. She goes in to watch the girl give the urine sample as the medical professionals do. And she's talking with her and trying to figure out like what's going on, like what's happening with you. And everything is checking the box of like, she's not being abused. So it's a very interesting, it might be some kind of blood condition or something, but it really does start to feel like maybe this girl's not dealing with abuse, but Santos truly believes that she does. And I think that this is going to be a teaching moment for Santos to not just assume the worst. And I think that that's something that's going to play out throughout the season is that Santos, because she is a go-getter. Santos jumps right to conclusions pretty quickly. She's pretty quick to jump to different things. And I think she's going to have to try to reel that back in. She is somebody that will go headfirst into something, but at a speed I think that can be kind of reckless at times. And if you've ever watched Grey's Anatomy, you know she reminds me of Alex Karev, the way that she kind of just goes after something. She's got a really rough exterior, but I think is a really good person deep down. She's just been through a lot as a kid. Another patient that is seen is Mr. Williams, and this is Dr. McKay's patient. We love Dr. McKay. She's now ankle monitor free. And this one is probably, to me, the most intriguing patient because Dr. McKay has had some good interactions with Mr. Williams, and then she will go out of the room and come back, and then he's very hostile and very almost violent, definitely verbally, and does start to like get up and like she's kind of like whoa, and she tells one of I think it's actually Donald. She grabs some one of the nurses or one of the security guards from outside in the hallway and tells them to come stand by the door just in case there is an altercation. But it doesn't quite get to that. But you can tell he gets like very frustrated and very angry very quickly. She comes in because he's had some issues with like a wrist injury and like a knee injury. He presented with a nosebleed, but she's trying to get like an or like a knee brace or something on him or some kind of brace on him. I can't remember if it's knee or the wrist that she's trying to brace up. But anyway, she's trying to give him a brace and he gets real abrasive and he's like, no, like, I don't want your stupid brace. Get away from me. And she's like, whoa, like, what's going on? You were just fine a minute ago. Some people think because the nosebleed might be something with the brain tumor. Sometimes that can have you acting in different ways where you kind of have this bipolar reaction to different things. So that's all cool to hear all the medical experts try to break down the show based off of, and it is cool because they said that if you're a medical expert or you're in the clinical field or you're a nurse, you can actually pick up on different things that they're hinting at based off of the prognosis or like the diagnosis of different things that are happening throughout the episode, which doesn't really take away if you're just a normal watcher like me who I don't have any medical expertise, where I'm just watching it as somebody like what a patient would be watching. But they said as a clinical person, you would probably be able to pick up on some of the things that are getting ready to happen based off of what is being experienced by the patients in that episode. So that's really cool to me. I think that's a wonderful thing that they're doing. So I'm really excited to see what all happens to these patients. But 21 patients in focus this year, that's going to be crazy. I'm assuming that the illusion, because at the very beginning, Dr. Shin, who is who is the night attending, who's transitioning, passing it off to Dr. Robby at the beginning of the episode, he says something along the lines of like, oh, July 4th weekend, it's pretty quiet. And he goes, well, you just cursed us. And then Dr. Shin, the night attending, goes, you day people are funny because you believe in all these curses because everything crazy happens at night, I'm assuming. So there's a banter there. But basically, they had cursed it. Something bad's going to happen. I'm assuming fireworks or something is going to be involved. There's going to be patients with missing limbs or something like that with firework issues because it is July 4th. So I'm really excited to see what other patients we run into. The last patient that we see is the abandoned baby, and this baby is found abandoned in a restroom. Uh, there is a moment where it pans to inside of the waiting room, and there's a lady sitting on a chair in the waiting room. It's all crowded. There's people standing around, and this person, the sound drops out, and this person's observing security and a doctor running into and nursing running into the bathroom. And for a moment, I thought the TV broke, but then I was like, oh no, she's definitely deaf. Like this is definitely somebody who is either hard of hearing or deaf, who can't hear what's going on, but can see visually that something is happening. And she's looking towards the bathroom, like, what's going on? And then that's why I love this show, because it is so beautiful to me. The fact that like the writers were intentional enough to go, there are, because there was a hard of hearing or deaf patient last year during the mass casualty episode because they don't know what's going on. But they do such a nice job of showing what this person is seeing, but having the anxiety and the fear of like just watching people interact in body language and pointing and yelling and kind of hustling towards one way and running towards the other. And she's trying to figure out, all right, what's going on? And you don't think about that if you're not deaf or hard of hearing. It would be terrifying to be looking around going, what is happening, and not being able to figure it out because people around you cannot speak with sign language. Like the ASL is not available and you can't figure out based off of social cues if you should be worried or anxious, or I can't imagine. So this is a wonderful, wonderful thing that I think they're getting ready to launch into. We're going to get to see this patient go back into the ER and try to experience the healthcare system being deaf. I wonder if, well, you know what? I'll leave that for later, but I'll have to remember it. So I'll say something here. I do wonder if one of the team members, sorry, one of the colleagues, one of the physicians, one of the clinical staff, one of the nurses speak ASL. I do wonder if ASL is something that comes up in this episode coming up. So we will see. But one thing, I have it going on in the background to try to trigger my memory. I always keep the episode on mute and kind of watch as I'm trying to record to try to bring up different things. Dr. Langdon has to now confront a patient that he has known since last season, known since he's been in this ER, and that is Louis. And Louis is our frequent flyer. He's always in the ED, mostly because of his drinking problem. He struggles with alcoholism. And we see Dr. Langdon in the first couple of scenes sitting in the waiting room waiting for his access to be granted to go back into the ER through scanning a badge, but because he doesn't have his badge because he's been suspended, the nurses actually have to let him in, and they're like, all right, fine, and they let him in. But right as he's going back, he sees Louis in the waiting room. He goes, hey doc, I haven't seen you in a while. And then you realize Langdon's going to have to confront his demons, and his demons are the fact that he was stealing drugs from a patient that really, really needed these drugs. And there's this full circle moment where Langdon and Louis are sitting in the triage, and Langdon is explaining, like, hey, I got addicted to benzos and I was stealing your drugs. And the look of disappointment, but also you can tell Louis is such a nice guy, and he does have a problem with struggling with overconsumption of alcohol, but he is such a genuine human being that he's trying to connect with Langdon, but he just doesn't quite understand why somebody that he trusted would do that to him, to betray that trust. And they start to get into a really great moment, and that's when I think Princess comes in and says, "Hey," um, or one of the nurses comes in and says, "Hey, we've got an abandoned baby that we found in the bathroom, and we're gonna need somebody to make sure that this baby's okay." Which is just the one way I think you could pull a doctor away after this intense moment, because otherwise Langdon would have been like, "No, hold on." But he has this moment where he's got to be pulled away because that baby was abandoned in the bathroom, and he steps away with the nurses to figure out what's going on with that baby. But we're going to set up a really great, I think, back and forth between Louis and Langdon. Louis he's got a big abscess on his gum where it looks really bad, and where it's almost like his mouth is decaying because of the alcoholism. But he's also going to have to give it his stomach pump because it's too full. And I just, we'll get to predictions. But that's kind of where we leave Langdon is. And another thing with Langdon, during all of this, he's trying to talk to Dr. Robby, and Robby has no interest in talking to him. He keeps trying to get away from him. He's avoiding eye contact. Any moment he gets with Langdon, he just kind of skirts out. And he doesn't, because Dr. Robby feels betrayed, I think, because Langdon lied to him, continued to lie to him. And then when confronted with the truth that Langdon was stealing benzos, that Robby then had to deal. And they had such a great relationship. They were such great friends. And now Robby feels like he's been betrayed. But also that is something that he is trying to also cope with, is losing a great friend like Langdon. Tie that all in with all the other stuff and the PTSD. I'm sure we're going to have a big Robby and Langdon moment at some point soon, and that relation starts to get on the mend. So I'm really excited to see where that relationship goes. And after that, I think we've caught up on everybody so far that I think that we need to catch up on. The only other person is Dana Evans, has a nurse that's a young nurse right out of school named Emma Nolan, and she's walking Emma through and touring her through the ED and touring her through the Pitt. They actually have to take care of a patient that I believe is homeless and doesn't have access to hygiene or different hygiene products or whatever it might be, obviously, and can't bathe and stinks up the waiting room. So they have to take him back, and they shower him. They take care of him. And Dana's doing this out of kindness of her heart. Like, this is a charge nurse who's been here forever, who could have easily have gone, somebody else deal with that. But she steps out. She shows Emma like how we take care of people here at the Pitt, and then she allows Emma to do the work. But Dana is there to also make sure that she knows this is what we do. This is why we do what we do. And Dana just has that motherly figure. She's so great. So I'm glad that Dana is back and really instrumental so far in this season, because she's dealing with the baby when the baby's in the bathroom. She's dealing with Emma, who is brand new, trying to figure out what was going on in this world. And then it's also dealing with the homeless patient who doesn't have anybody to care for them, or people that do care for him. So that's a really nice thing to see. And I'm looking forward to seeing where Dana goes in this season as well. But that's pretty much it. It leaves on a cliffhanger with the abandoned baby, where they get the blood work back, the vitals, and there's clues as to why she is brought in, or that baby is brought in. But it goes away with Al Hashimi looking at the baby, and that's the last shot of the episode of her looking down at the baby after they say, Al Hashimi, what's wrong? Like, what's going on? And nothing is said, and that's where we leave season 2, episode 1. is with Dr. Al Hashimi looking down at the baby that's clearly got something going on. So a lot of different things are happening heading into season two, episode two. Here are some predictions for me. I think that Dr. Moan is the one that's going to be with the one ASL. I think she's going to be the one that can speak it. That's just a prediction for me. I think it makes sense to because she didn't really have a whole lot to do, I think, in this first episode that I can think of, where I think this would be perfect for her because she is somebody that is very methodical, very um, intuitive, and I think could be a really because everybody else is kind of dealing with their own big problem right now. Whereas I think Moan is not really linked up with anybody yet, or it could be one of the nurses. I could see one of the nurses also being well equipped or having the ability to speak ASL. So maybe we get some sign language from Moan and them, but we'll see. That's one prediction. I think I do think Louis is headed for a crash in his health. I think either close to death or death. I think Langdon is going to have to try to deal with that trauma. And I think that'll be something that kind of pushes him back towards maybe relapsing. I think that is something I feel is happening because Louis is such a great character. It's written so well. He's built out so well. He's a frequent flyer. He's somebody that I think Langdon really enjoys, but he's going to see kind of the product of what happens when you do get into addiction through Louis. Unfortunately, I think Robby and Langdon obviously have their moment of going back and hashing it out. I do think that Santos oversteps and thinks that it's abuse, but I don't think it actually is abuse at this point. I think she's just reading into things, and that's her lesson is to try not to jump to conclusions every single time you think something because it might be wrong, and now you've lost the trust of a patient. Mel, I don't think that the malpractice thing is going anywhere. I think she's just going to add more anxiety to what she's dealing with. I'm really interesting to see outside of that, like where she goes with, what patient she goes with or what she has to deal with. Maybe it's later on that we just don't know yet. But I really do just think the added pressure, anxiety of the malpractice lawsuit is going to be something that weighs on her throughout the season. But I don't think she actually gets sued. Uh, is my thought. Dana, I think training Emma is going to be really interesting, and I could actually see a world where Dana might actually almost convince the young one not to necessarily want to do this anymore. I don't know. I feel like Dana's going to have some conflict going forward with the fact that she had just been assaulted, where she's trying to get back into it and trying to convince herself that she's happy, but is still dealing with the fallout from last year when she got hit by the patient. Um, I do think that Whitaker with the medical students, something is there. Something is happening where I think maybe he does something wrong or teaches them something wrong and they do something wrong where he's going to have to try to either course correct or correct them in some way. Like I just feel like there's a lot of focus on the fact that he's doing everything right now. I think that's the thing. I do think that we're going to get more of an establishment of the relationship between um, Santos and Dr. Garcia. I think that's a relationship that will be built out of this. I think that's where you're going to get your romantic relationship in this season is Dr. Garcia, Yolanda Garcia, and Dr. Santos. And I think there's going to be obviously in that kind of character arc. I think there is a focus on LGBTQ plus relationships in the healthcare field. So I think that'll play a part. I think Cassie McKay. I think that it's just too tough to tell where her character and this character is going because this is the biggest mystery besides the baby is her patient that she's now dealing with. Like it'll probably connect with something that Dr. McKay is used to or has dealt with in the past, but we're just not quite there yet. We just don't have enough. I believe that we're going to get some of the team that we haven't seen yet. I think Kiara Alfaro is back as the social worker, and we haven't seen her yet. I also think that we're going to get more from Gloria Underwood, who's the chief medical officer there. Dr. Jack Abbott, I think once we get towards the night half of the shift, we'll get more of him. I think Dr. Shin's pretty much done for the year. Maybe he's got a couple more hours left on shift where we'll see him quite a bit. But and then Dr. Or not Dr. I think Donald, the nurse, I think he Perla, I think we're going to get some conflict with them somewhere as well. I just don't know what that would be yet, but I think there's a reason they set up Donald and his kid. Maybe the kid comes into the ER. I don't know. Something I think happens with him, or we usually get one of the nurses, I think, struggling with something beyond just Dana and now Emma, who's kind of an attachment to Dana. So will be interesting to see what happens there. But yeah, like Dr. Moan, she's dealing with the elderly patient who is popping weed brownies like they're candy, but there's just not, like, I don't know, there's just not a whole lot with her yet. So I don't really know. I feel like she's going to also be the one that, like I said, with ASL, but also dealing with some of these other patients that we'll see. But it'll be interesting. I think that Moan's kind of that doctor that you try to challenge her with different obstacles, because I think the weed brownie is a lot of fun that she's having to deal with right now. So those are just some predictions. I think that's pretty much it as far as my predictions. I think, oh no, Al Hashimi and I don't think Dr. Robby and Al Hashimi become a romantic thing. I just think, again, it's a weird thing to shove into a 15-hour shift to happen on our first day with him going on this sabbatical. I At the very beginning of the season, I don't actually believe he goes on a sabbatical. Um, I think this is going to deal more with him actually just facing his problems at hand. And if he does leave, it's going to be for like a real sabbatical, and he actually reaches out to get mental health support. This is something that Noah Wiley has talked about, that Dr. Robby is going to struggle with this season, is mental, and he's going to have to face the fact that he had resources at his disposal, but he's not yet used them. And I think we're going to get something there. Maybe we get a little bit psychiatrist stuff. Maybe we get a little bit of that. I don't know. We'll see. But I think that there's something coming to a head with his mental state and how he's not faced his demons quite yet. But that's going to do it. That'll do it. I feel like I've talked enough. This has just been such a great show, and I was really excited to jump back into this. This has done really well on IMDb so far. Launched right back into the magic that they captured in season 1, and right away in season 2, I'm already got so many intrigue about different patients, different storylines, different characters, and how they're going to interact with people. So I'm really, really pumped to see what happens this coming Thursday, January 15th, when the next episode of the Pitt season 2 comes out. We will be doing a recap, and hopefully we'll drop that on Monday. Hopefully we will have all those episodes out on Monday. That's when I'm going to try to release everything that I record, because I'll typically record content on Sunday, and sometimes you might get some bonus episodes based on what we're watching, what we're talking about on this podcast. This has been the first episode where we've actually recapped something, deep dive, and we're past the intro of the Screen Society podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You can find us over at the Screen Society podcast over on Instagram and X. You can also email us at the Screen Society podcast at yahoo.com. We are on Facebook as well, the Screen Society podcast. I will start to drop content on there. We're going to be at TikTok at the Screen Society podcast as well eventually. The only one that's got a weird username right now is X. X is still Grab Your Popcorn Pod, which was going to be the name of this podcast, but I saw so many different variations of Grab Your Popcorn that I didn't want to copy other people. So that's when I came up with the Screen Society podcast. So if you're looking for us, that's where you can find us, the Screen Society podcast, on all things social. You can find us also on YouTube, the Screen Society podcast, and you can listen to us wherever you get your podcast. Thank you again for listening. Thanks for watching. If you watched, we hope to see you guys next time. Like, subscribe, comment, and review helps people find us. And until then, we will see you in the next episode.